Number 1. So this happened back in 6th grade, and I think it's the closest I've ever come to dying. At the school I went to, we always used to have some kind of big end-of-the-year field trip. We'd usually go to some city and look at all the important or historic buildings, have lunch, learn some stuff, and leave. That year, we were going to New York, and me and a couple of friends planned out what we wanted to do. We wanted to do our own thing. Go shopping, get some new clothes, that kind of thing. Only when we got to school the next day, the teachers made it really clear that we had to stick with the group. But since we were all stupid, rebellious 6th graders, we decided we'd just have to work around that. So on the ride to New York, me, my friend Olivia, and my friend Devin decided we were going to leave the group and do whatever we wanted. Our class was pretty big, almost 60 of us, because they put 5, 6, and 7 together. So we thought if we weren't gone too long, nobody would notice. We had brought money, and we planned on buying tons of stuff, because even though we were a big class, we lived in a small town with only a couple of stores. Olivia loved shopping, and she had actually researched the area we were going to be around and picked out all the good stores. She even made us a little map. She was really good at that kind of stuff. And anyway, when we got to New York, Devin chickened out because his parents were pretty strict and he didn't want his phone to get taken away again. Olivia and I decided that he could just give us his money and we'd buy the stuff for him. So he did that, and after they herded everybody off the bus, we kinda just lingered back. We were right about them being distracted by everybody else because we got away no problem. Olivia's map worked out pretty good, and we were gone probably 10 or 20 minutes before stuff started getting scary. We had just left the store, and Olivia was carrying her shopping bags when this guy noticed us. It probably wasn't hard to pick us out. 2 little 6th graders walking around alone, carrying a crap ton of clothes. He started calling out to us, saying how he could buy us more clothes, all the jewelry we wanted if we'd just come with him. Of course we didn't believe him. We just kept walking. Heading on to the next store, only this guy wouldn't stop talking. He started following us now and getting kind of pissed that we wouldn't answer him. I told him to F off because I thought that he would take a hint. There were tons of people around, and we figured he couldn't really kidnap us in front of 200 people, but he kept following us. And he started getting a lot closer. He had probably been about 30 or 40 yards back, where we could barely see him over the other people. But now he was only about 15 or 20 feet. And that was when we started panicking, because, crap, there was a child molester after us, and we had no idea where the group was. We decided to split off from the sidewalk and head down into some alley, because we figured people would call out the guy if he started to follow us. But of course, it was New York. And everybody else was too wrapped up in their own little problems. So now we're walking down this dark effing alley and this guy is still after us. He fell a little back, probably back to about 30 feet now, but now he's not pretending to be a good guy. He's talking about how he's going to goddamn kill us and how they will never find our bodies and how much fun he's gonna have with us. And he's smiling this deranged grin the entire time. We're both on the verge of tears now because we figure this effing psychopath is about to kill us. Olivia just decides to drop her stuff and yells, "Run!" So we both start effing running, and we're probably around halfway through this alley, but then she turns around and she screams. So I turn around, and I see this psychopath is running after us now too, and he has a goddamn knife. We're both screaming now, and I'm running faster than I ever have before, and we just run out of this alley back into this crowd of people. And as we tried to get into the crowd of people to make sure this guy can't stab us to death, I turn around, and he's just standing, back in the alley, smiling. When I turn back around, this random lady is asking us what's wrong because we're both completely just sobbing, and Olivia's dress is ripped and I'm bleeding because my arm scraped the wall, and we're crying so hard that we can't talk. As soon as we can actually manage to talk, we tell her our school, and she looks it up and calls them, and we somehow manage to find our group again. We were both forced to stay right next to the teachers because of course they didn't trust us anymore, and I really don't blame them. We didn't even tell them about the man though, and as soon as I get home, I'm grounded and my phone is taken away, but still, nobody but me and Olivia knows about that man. School ends a couple of days later and I got my phone back, so I text Olivia and she sends me a picture of our class in front of some important building and says, "Look at the bottom left corner." And the guy is in the picture, mostly hidden behind some wall, but you can still see his face, smiling that deranged grin for the camera. We never really talked about the man again, and I didn't want to bring it up, and Olivia didn't either. I'm extremely terrified of cities now, though, and I like to stick to a couple of towns near me, and that's really it. There's a lower chance of getting stabbed to death. Number 2. This is my first post, so bear with me. This happened when I was in first grade, so about 6 or 7 years old, and now I'm in my mid-20s, just for context. Every year, the first graders take a trip to the zoo, about an hour away from our tiny town. I was a shy little girl, so I spent most of the bus ride staring out the window while the other kids were busy conversing with each other. A Jeep pulls up where I have clear look into the vehicle and at the driver. We were on the interstate. I saw him playing with something under his shirt, all the while looking at me and then back at the road. Back at me and so forth. One hand on the wheel and the other fiddling with whatever was under his shirt. I couldn't keep my eyes off of him, fascinated about what the hell he was hiding under his shirt. And then he lifted up his shirt and, yep, I got a good look as to what he was playing with the whole time. He waved at me. Granted, I was a little girl and had never seen one before, nor did I understand why he was doing what he was doing. A girl that was near me asked what I was looking at, and then she got to see for herself. She started hollering, and I swear to God, all the kids on the bus ran to the windows to see what was going on. The Jeep gunned off, and I'm sure it got off the next exit. I remember telling my mom about it when I got home, but then I just sort of blocked it out of my mind. It was only several years later, and when I had 2 daughters on my own, I recalled this event. Just last night I was talking to my mom about it again, wishing that I had been more mature and thought to get his license plate number or something. All I remember is a Jeep, SUV, or anything of some type. That it was a middle-aged white guy, so... Creepy dude that thinks pleasing himself next to a school bus full of young children is acceptable. I hope to never meet you again. Sorry for the interjection, but... what an awful human. Number 3. I remember this rather clearly, even though I was young. I was on a field trip to a popular public park with my daycare. It wasn't unusual for adults to go to this park by themselves. It was super decked out. There was a train, vendors, sometimes concerts or clowns, so it wasn't only a playground. Anyway, I was always the awkward kid, so I wasn't playing with the other daycare kids. Instead, I was sitting quietly off to the side, just daydreaming, as I often opted to do. Which made me an easy target, since I was just chilling solo. There were others around, by the way. Like, I wasn't secluded. I was just doing my own thing. My mom had talked to me about stranger danger before, but I had it in my head that strangers were scary, so I actually didn't know what a stranger really meant at the time. I just knew they were bad people, I guess. This woman walked up to me with a camera in her hands, and she complimented my t-shirt, which had a cat photo on the front, and told me that she worked for a cat magazine, and thought that I would be a good model for it, so naturally, I was totally down for the prospect. My daycare teachers and the other kids didn't notice I was talking to a random woman. She asked me questions like my address, where my mom works, my mother's phone number, my social security. I couldn't really answer most of her questions because I was, goddamn 4 years old. Anyway, it didn't deter her. She got my name and age, everything I did know I told her when she asked. She was super nice, I remember, and after I answered her, she took a picture of me. After the picture was taken, she said she needed to go to her car to grab something. I can't recall what or why I had to go with her, according to her story, but I got up and went with her. I remember holding her hand. She was literally unlocking her van when my daycare teacher came running through the parking lot and screaming at her. Like bloody murder screaming.
Get the hell away from her! I'm calling the police! Help! She's kidnapping my kid!
The actual 9 yards. Woman seemingly forgot about me because she hopped into her car and drove off in a snap, leaving me behind. I remember I was pissed at my daycare teacher because I probably wouldn't have been in that cat magazine after he scared her off. I was crying. The daycare lady was consoling me, saying it was okay, she left, I'm safe, but I was crying because I couldn't be in her magazine. My mom picked me up and took me to the police station where I was asked all about the incident. They never caught her to my knowledge, like, I didn't know her name or anything, but I remember my mom was irritated because the best I could do for her description was long brown hair and jeans. Well, anyway, that's how I was almost kidnapped and how I was pissed at my rescuer. Number 4. Not safe for work. When I was 12 years old, AIM, Instant Messenger, was huge. Everyone had an account, even the very antisocial people at the time. Me, my friend Jen, had more friends than anyone. Even our school's IT guy, Kevin. Personally, I never liked Kevin. Everyone thought he was really cool, but I never much cared for overly friendly people. They always end up wanting something from you, but Kevin was in his early to mid-20s at the time. Typical lanky, awkward IT guy. But something about him just made me feel weird. As is all too common in these stories, you should always trust your gut. Guess I was just too young to know what that entailed. So at the time, my laptop, it was running very slow and pretty much infected with every possible virus known to man. My friend Jen was trying to use it and she got very frustrated at its speed. At school the next day she was still complaining about it, when Kevin, the IT guy, overheard. He came over and tried chatting me up about the laptop. Very awkward me was trying to get out of the conversation with him, but Jen wouldn't let that happen. She spoke for me and said that I needed it fixed and gave him my screen name for AIM. I begrudgingly said that I'd talk to him later and walked away with Jen. Literally the only thing I cared about at that point in my life was anime. Really? I have to talk to this guy instead of watching Yu Yu Hakusho? Lame. I log on after school and he messages me straight away. I make small talk and he asks to remote him into my computer. I give him access and he does his thing. He tells me it's done and I thank him. Thinking that it's the end of our interaction, I began watching my shows and thought nothing of it. Until his window keeps blinking. I ignored it at first, but the notification sound keeps going on. Finally, I open the window and see a ton of frowny faces. I ask him what's wrong and he says the job isn't done. He has to physically see my laptop and install something on it, and that I should come over or vice versa. I was creeped right out. I tried to tell myself it's probably normal. My mom came home and I asked her if it's normal and showed her the messages. She took my computer and introduced herself, told him yes, and even gave him directions. And I've mentioned in previous posts how my parents, more specifically my mother, weren't very good at parenting. It just wasn't really their thing. Next thing I know, Kevin, my mother, and I are sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop. He sits next to me and I move immediately next to my mom. My alarm bells have gone off, but apparently my mom saw no immediate threat. And they talked for 2 hours while I sat in silence. He finally said the scan was complete and said his goodbyes. As is customary in my home, I had to see him to the door. My mom said he was my friend, after all, and I asked if she could do it, and she shot me the mom look, so I obeyed. I saw him to the entryway, and he turned around and stopped. He started babbling about how nice it was to hang out and we should do it again sometime. I told him that hopefully my computer won't break so we won't need to. He put on his best dejected expression and left my house. The following weeks, he guilt-tripped me into having conversations online with him. I really wanted to block him, but I also didn't want to have to deal with explaining that to him in person when I went to school, so I just decided to deal with it. Every day for him was just self-pity and BS. Why don't you talk to me more? I don't have any friends, I'm so single, wah wah wah. And even at 12, I had a very low tolerance for liars and martyrs, so finally one day I got the courage to tell him how pathetic I thought it was that he's how old and he's still complaining more than a child, and that I didn't want to hear it anymore. I didn't receive any instant messages after that, and finally I was in the clear. Or so I thought. A week later, we all went on a field trip. I spent all day messing around with my Tamagotchi, minding my own business. I didn't even notice Kevin was there as a chaperone. Halfway through the day, my teacher grabs me and pulls me away from the rest of the class. She looks furious and Kevin is doing his dejected face again. My teacher says,
So, You think it's funny to pick on him? Is it because he's the IT guy? Do you think he's a nerd? Is that what makes him pathetic, huh?
I'm floored. I stammer and tell her,
No. I'm the nerd. I would never, but he's different. You don't know what happened.
She cut me off.
Kevin, why don't you tell her about your suicide attempt? That's right, Missy. He tried to commit suicide 3 months ago. When you're in my class, you will never torture people like that ever again. You don't know their story, so you don't know how hurtful you can be.
She motioned for me to get out of her sight. I turned back to catch up with the rest of my class, feeling powerless and defeated. If I don't talk to him online, I get in trouble at school. He'll just lie, and they'll believe him because he's an adult. I couldn't tell my mom because she'd just think it was my fault and scold me just like the teacher. I felt very alone. The conversations online then started to make a turn. He began talking to me in a more sexual nature. How he'd treat me if I gave my virginity to him. What to do with a guy's member, etc. If I ignored him, I was faced with guilt trips and possible trouble at school. I did my best to remain neutral and tell him to knock it off in the nicest way possible, which, of course, only made him do it more. He ignored me at school, but online he was completely different. Manipulative and predatory. At least I don't think it was romantic or anything. I didn't feed the fire, but I also had no way to put it out. Finally, summer came and I ignored him without consequence. I knew he'd be there at school when I went to 8th grade in the fall, but I didn't care. I could finally unwind and spend the time with the little friends that I had. Every day when I did get online, though, it would be a constant barrage of frowny faces and, quote-unquote,
I should just end my life.
from Kevin. None of the messages got a response, but I still felt scared to block him. He knew my address after all, and I played outside all summer. My mom used to even forget me at soccer practice. There's no way she'd even notice I was missing until I was well after I was gone. I was always on the lookout for any suspicious cars. It was hard to relax, but I had my very first girlfriend to distract me. Finally, 8th grade started, and I tried to tell Jen about Kevin. She laughed and told me that I should be happy that any guy is paying attention to me. She actually went to him and told him what I said, so I guess I can't even have friends anymore. When I got home, I set my status to away and watched the guilt trip messages pour in. My away message was
F off.
It was for a while after that. From then on, I always logged on as away. I barely spoke to anyone, and the only one who I could trust was my girlfriend, and even she didn't think it was a big deal. About halfway through the school year, I told him that I was finally sick of it. That I don't care if he goes to my teacher. If he says anything sexual again to me, I'll tell everyone how he really is, and I won't stop until they believe me. And he finally left me alone. But I knew he'd be back. I blocked him on every social outlet I could think of and ignored him at school. I asked all the other girls if he had said anything like that to them, and thank goodness he hadn't. A month after I told him off, he quit, and we got the new IT guy, who was not creepy and was great, to be honest. I became a freshman and it was my first time in public school. It wasn't long before I came home one day and I got an instant message from a scream name that I didn't recognize. I made small talk, but they wouldn't tell me exactly who they were. The only thing that they offered was,
I left you a present behind your house. They were my sisters. I have a feeling you like them.
I was scared but curious. As a shiny, fresh high schooler, I thought I was invincible. I called my friend Nikia and I talked to her while I went outside, to be safe. Maybe if I was on the phone, nothing would happen. There was a big white garbage bag in the garden behind my house. It was full of high-heeled shoes and boots. Sick! I hadn't had any of my own yet. Radical. I took them inside and thanked the mystery person. He said they were one of the kids in my Catholic school class. He said he was Matt, and he missed me and was glad I liked the gift. And he said that I just have to promise to wear them to school. Okay, can do. The next day I wore a pair of boots to school, and when I got home, Matt messaged me. He asked if I wore the boots, and I said yes and asked him how his day was. He didn't answer and just kept asking about the boots. If they were comfy, if they were hard to walk in, etc. I was kind of weirded out, so I IM'd my friend Jen and asked her what Matt's deal was. I copy and pasted the conversation and she said that she didn't know who that was. but it didn't match Matt's screen name. I demanded this Matt to tell me who he was, and he said it was Kevin. He said,
I'm in a really low place right now. I just missed how cool you used to be. You're older now and seem to be doing fine. Can we please be friends?
well, I'm an idiot and somehow had a soft spot at that moment and agreed. I wasn't too mentally sound either, and I felt sympathetic to his suicidal tendencies. I told him as long as he didn't act creepy, I could look past everything and be his friend. I asked him to be honest with me about his shoes. He did say they were his. He had liked to wear them, but since he lived with his parents, he couldn't have kept them in the house anymore. Weird, really. What does that mean? I don't know. Alright, I'm gonna leave it in. Weird, really weird, but I was still psyched about all these shoes. Whatever floats your boat, dude. He started off innocent enough, but every day he'd ask questions about the shoes. I ignored it at first, but then he seemed to get angry when I wouldn't tell him about them. I'd tell him a detail or two if I could remember, like if they were comfy or not, and if they looked good, etc., but that didn't seem to be what he was asking me or what he wanted. One day he was particularly aggressive and asked if I had fallen in them. I laughed and said no and tried to ignore it. 15-year-old me still not getting the picture. His window kept blinking and he requested a webcam session, and of course I hit the accept like an idiot, and there he was, pleasing himself on camera, asking if I could put the shoes on and fall over for him. I flicked him off and blocked him. Horrified at what he'd probably done with the shoes, I just threw them all away every other week for a year. I'd get creepy messages from unknown screen names that somebody was going to show up at my school and then trip me and then spill himself over me. Or come to my house and put on the shoes himself. I blocked every screen name he tried to use. At the time, I didn't know how to prevent this kind of thing. I didn't even tell my mom because she was no help. It didn't occur to me that the police were an option. I'm surprised that I didn't get assaulted, honestly, because looking back on how I handled myself, it's terrifying. You don't realize what's happened to you until you turn 20 or so and think back to all the pedophilic situations you've been in. And a lot of my friends and I have experienced it on AIM. At the time, it seemed normal because it happened so much, and even Jen contacted me years later and apologized. She had finally realized the gravity of the situation, and she was actually quite sorry for encouraging him to harass me. We're not friends, her and I, but at least it helps. The last time he made an appearance was 4 months ago. He tried to add me on Facebook for the 15 millionth time, and I don't block him because I still want him to see my face. That I'm not just some fantasy that he had. I'm a person. I'm not broken or made up. I still exist, and I want him to know that I know what he did and I'm not hiding from him. I message him every time he tries to add me and tell him to F off. He's a pervert, etc., and he never responds. However, if I ever see him in person again, he's going to be very, very sorry he ever forced me to look at those sad genitals, because if we do meet again, Kevin, I'll be happy to liberate you from them. For your little guy's sake, please, Kevin, let's not meet again.